Hi, welcome to the third functions tutorial titled the parabola. In today's tutorial, we will be looking at the parabola, how it is sketched, and to what questions it applies to. In terms of what you need to know to progress with this tutorial, you need to be familiar with your grade 10 work. You also need to have gone through the first two functions tutorials titled What is a function and the straight line. Also, I'd suggest you go through the section titled Converting Words to Numbers. Reference to these sections are made in the DVD workbook. What is a parabola? A parabola is a function or a relationship where there are two x or two independent values for every one dependent y value. Stated differently, for every y value, there are two different x values. Let us use an example to illustrate this. You are flying in an aeroplane over a mountain. Let us use x to represent your distance from the start of your journey, and we'll use y to represent your height above sea level. At 500 meters from the start of your journey, you are 1,000 meters above sea level. At 750 meters from the start of your journey, you are 2,000 meters above sea level. At 1,000 meters from the start of your journey, you are 2,500 meters above sea level, and that is the tip of the mountain. At 1,250 meters from the start of your journey, you are 2,000 meters above sea level, and at 1,500 meters from the start of your journey, you are now back to 1,000 meters above sea level. Now, look at this graphic. Let us remove the mountain. Notice the curve that we start to see. Using this graphic, we can say that the y values increased to a point that is the top of the mountain and then began decreasing after that. The tip of the mountain was the turning point of our graph, where the gradient or the slope went from being positive to negative. This equation is given by y is equals to negative 6 over 1,000x squared plus 12x minus 3,500. Do not fret just yet as to how I got to this equation. The important thing to note is that the highest x power or exponent is 2. This indicates that it is a parabola, or that there are two x values for every one y value. Let us take a closer look at the parabola. We will begin by looking at the two standard forms of the parabola and how we move from the equation onto the sketches. We will then look at moving from the sketch onto the equation. I'm going to start with the parabola that is of the form y is equals to a x minus b squared plus q. And I'm going to go through 5 rules that we can use to sketch this type of parabola. Rule number 1. Look at the a value. If the a value is positive, the parabola's shape is that of a smiley face. If the a value is negative, it looks more like a frown. Rule number 2. Write down your turning point. If it is in this form, your turning point is very simply PQ. P being your x value of the turning point and Q being your y value. 3. Determine your x-intercepts. Do this by making y equals to 0. That means that a x minus b squared plus q is equals to 0, and you solve for the quadratic. 4. Determine your y-intercept. That happens when x is equals to 0. That means that y will equal a 0 minus p squared plus q. Rule number 5, sketch. We are going to start by looking at the parabola of the form f of x is equal to a x minus p squared plus q. The example I'm going to use is fx is equal to 3x minus 2 squared minus 5. Step 1, I look at my a value. In this case, my a value is positive 3, which means that it's the smiley face graph. Step 2, my turning point. Now remember that because it's in the form a x minus p squared plus q, my turning point is given by pq, which in this case is given by x minus p x minus 2. That means that 2 is my p value of my turning point, or my x value, and my y value is negative 5, or my q value is negative 5. Step 3, I look at my x-intercepts, and that happens when y is equal to 0, or when f of x is equal to 0. That means that 3 multiplied by x minus 2 squared minus 5 is equal to 0. That means that x minus 2 squared is equal to, take the 5 across, divided by that 3 to get rid of that 3 on that side. That means that x is equal to 2 plus square root 5 over 3, or x is equal to 2 minus square root 5 over 3. Those are my x-intercepts. I'm just going to convert that 2 plus root 5 over 3. I'm going to turn that into 3.3. It's more or less equal to. And this one here, my other x-intercept is x is equal to 0.71. Step 4, I look for my y-intercepts. My y-intercepts happen when x is equal to 0. Making a lot of mistakes today. That means that y is equal to 3 times 0 minus 2 squared minus 5, which is equal to 2 squared is 4 times 3 is 12 minus 5, which is equal to 7. That's my y-intercept. Let us do a quick recap of that before I move on. Firstly, I looked for my a value. My a value in this case is plus 3 because it's a x minus b squared plus q, which meant that my graph has the smiley face shape. Turning point was point pq, which in this case was 2 and negative 5. My x-intercept, step 3, I looked for was when y is equal to 0. I found my two x-intercepts to be x is equal to 3.3 and 0.71. That's just rounded off. I then looked at my y-intercept of when x is equal to 0. That means that my y-intercept is at 7. Now let's sketch this graph. First thing we know is that our turning point was at x is equal to positive 2, y is equal to negative 5. So it's going to be somewhere over there. Let's just do it a little bit more accurately. So that's our turning point. Second thing we know is that our two x-intercepts are going to be at positive 0.71, which will fall somewhere over there, and positive 3.3, which will fall somewhere over there. And our y-intercept is at positive 7. That means that our graph looks like this. that's 3.3, that's 0.71, and my axis of symmetry is at x is equal to my p value, which is 2, and my y value is -5. That means my axis of symmetry is x is equal to 2, and this is my graph f of x, my x-axis and my y-axis. Notice that I did not draw my graph very accurately. I just drew a more or less axis and I drew my points. I then filled in my points after I sketched my graph, which made it a little bit easier to do. You will see in the next exercise that I'm going to give you, there are some turning points which may be very negative or very positive, which means that your graph is going to be extremely big if you draw it to scale. You don't have to always draw it to scale. Draw it the way I've done and just fill in your points. Using the rules that we've just gone through, I want you to attempt the following. Press pause on your DVD player, and when you return, we will go through it together. The first one I gave you to do read g of x is equal to x minus 3 squared plus 4. Easy to do. Step 1, the a value, which is equal to +1, which means that it's the smiley face graph. Step 2, turning point. Turning point is PQ, which in this case is going to be +3, +4. X minus p squared plus q, that means that q is +4, p is +3. Step 3, we look at our x-intercepts, and that happens when y is equal to 0. That means that x minus 3 squared plus 4 is equal to 0. That means that x minus 3 squared is equal to -4. To get rid of the squared, I square root it. What I do to one side, I do to the other. Square root of a negative is undefined. That means that there are no x-intercepts. That doesn't mean that the graph is undefined. It just means that there are no x-intercepts. Step 4, I look for my y-intercept, which happens when x is equal to 0. That means that y is equal to 0 minus 3, which is -3, squared is +9, plus 4 is 13. Now let us look at sketching this graph. Again, I'm not going to do a very accurate sketch. I'm just going to do a more or less sketch. That's my y-axis, that's my x-axis. Please always label that. My turning point is at x is equal to 3, y is equal to 4. It's a smiley face graph, so you can see why there are no x-intercepts. My y-intercept is at +13, which means that my graph is going to look like this. And that's my graph g of x. Label it and label the turning point, which is 3 and 4. The second one I gave you to do read f of x is equal to -2 x minus 1 squared plus 8. Step 1, my a value. In this case, my a value is equal to -2, which means that it's the frown face graph. Step 2, my turning point. In this case, my turning point is PQ, which is going to be 1 and 8. Then I look for my x-intercepts, which happens when y is equal to 0, which means that -2 x minus 1 squared plus 8 is equal to 0. That means that x minus 1 squared is equal to, take the 8 across, it becomes -8, divide through by the -2. -8 divided by -2 is equal to 4, +4. get rid of the square sign, I square root it. What I do to one side, I do to the other. That means that x minus 1 is equal to positive or negative 2. Remember, the square root of something can be either positive or negative. That means that x is either equal to 2 plus 1, or x is equal to negative 2 plus 1. 2 plus 1 is equal to 3, minus 2 plus 1 is equal to minus 1. I then look for my y-intercept. My y-intercept happens when x is equal to 0, which in this case y will equal negative 2, 0 minus 1 squared plus 8. 0 minus 1 is negative 1, squared is 1, times negative 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 plus 8 is equal to positive 6. That's all the information I need. I can now sketch my graph. Firstly, the turning point is x is equal to 1, y is equal to 8. That's going to be somewhere over there. That's my turning point. My x-intercepts, one x-intercept is going to be at 3, which is going to be over here. My other x-intercept is at negative 1, which is over there. And my y-intercept is equal to positive 6, which is going to be over there. That means that my graph is going to look like that. That's the graph f of x. Label it. This is my x-axis, this is my y-axis, and all my points are in. The third one I gave you to do read j of x is equal to a quarter x plus 1 squared minus 8. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to look at my a value, which is 1 over 4, which means that my graph is the smiley face graph. Second thing, my turning point is going to be PQ. My p value in this case is negative 1. The reason it's negative 1 is because the standard form is x minus p. So in order for that to be minus p, that value has to be negative 1. And my q value, or the y value, y coordinate of my turning point, is negative 8. Then I'm going to look at my x-intercepts. That happens when y is equal to 0. That means that 1 over 4 x plus 1 squared minus 8 is equal to 0. That means that 1 over 4 x plus 1 squared, take the 8 across, is positive 8. Get rid of that quarter, which means we multiply it by 4, which is 32. To get rid of the squared, we square root it, positive, negative. That means that my two values are x is equal to, take the 1 across, negative 1 plus root 32, or negative 1 minus root 32. You can punch this into a calculator. You don't need to give it to me in simplest third form. You can just say negative 1 plus square root of 32, which gives me an answer of 4.66. Or if I say minus 1 minus root 32, it means that x is equal to negative 6.66. Then I'm going to look at my y-intercept. My y-intercept happens when x is equal to 0. So that will be 1 over 4, 0 plus 1 squared minus 8, which is equal to 0 plus 1 is 1, squared is 1, times 1 over 4 is just 1 over 4. 1 over 4 minus 8 is equal to negative 7.75. I just punched that into my calculator. I didn't bother to do the whole long calculation. You can choose which method suits you best. When I'm sketching my graph, remember that's my x-axis. As always, that's my y-axis. Start by looking at my turning point. I'm now going to draw my graph. As always, that's my y-axis and that's my x-axis. Start by looking at the turning point. Turning point, x is equal to -1, y is equal to -8, which is over there. My two x-intercepts are -6.66, which is going to be somewhere over here, -6.66, and positive 4.6, which is going to be somewhere over here, 4.66. That means my graph is going to look like that. Whoops. My graph is going to look like that. Label it as j of x, and the y-intercept was at -7.75. Notice that when I've got a quarter, when my a value becomes less than 1, my graph starts to expand outward. And you'll notice the examples where the a value is higher, my graph seems to be more closed in. The fourth one I gave you to do read k of x is equal to -1/3 x plus 2 squared plus 2. The first thing I'm going to do, again, look at my a value. In this case, it's -1/3, which means that it's a frown face graph. Turning point is at PQ, which is going to be -2 and +2. X-intercept, when y is equal to 0, that means that -1/3 multiplied by x plus 2 squared plus 2 is equal to 0. That means if I take the 2 across, that's going to become -2 multiplied by -3 to get rid of the -3rd. And I square root all of that to get rid of the square root sign, plus or minus. That means that x is equal to, take the 2 across, -2 plus square root of 6. 2 times 3 is 6. Negative times a negative is positive. Or x is equal to -2 minus square root 6. If I work that out on a calculator, -2 plus square root 6 is equal to positive 0.45. And if I work out the other one on a calculator, it's going to give me -4.45. Y-intercept happens when x is equal to 0. X is equal to 0, that's going to be -1/3 multiplied by 0 plus 2 squared plus 2, which if I plug it into the calculator, 0 plus 2 is 2, squared is 4, times that is -4/3 plus 2 will give me an answer of 0.67. Sketching the graph, I'm going to do that over here. I'm just going to erase some of this. That's my x-axis, that's my y-axis. Turning point is at x is equal to -2, y is equal to 2, so that's going to be somewhere over there. That's -2, 2. My y-intercept is at 0.67. Two x-intercepts, one is at 0.45, which is over there, and the other one at -4.45, which is going to be somewhere over there, 4.45. That means that my graph is going to look like that, and that's k of x. Please remember to label your graph. The fifth one I gave you to do read h of x is equal to negative 2x squared plus 8x minus 16. Now you will see later on in this tutorial how we can sketch a parabola off this graph. However, for now we are looking for it in the form ax minus b squared plus q. So I'm going to try and adapt that to that form. I'm going to start by taking out a common factor of negative 2. That will leave me with x squared minus 4x plus 8. Keep the minus 2 outside of it. I'm now going to use a technique called completing the square. That minus 4x is still there. To that I'm going to add 4 over 2 squared. Now you will remember in one of the previous algebra tutorials we did cover completing the square. If you haven't gone through it, or if you are unfamiliar with this, please go through that first before progressing on with this example. We've added 4 over 2 squared. Because we've added 4 over 2 squared and we don't want to change this, we're going to then subtract 4 over 2 squared plus 8. That's going to equal negative 2 multiplied by x. This is going to be x minus 4 over 2 is 2 squared, which is 4. But I'm going to leave it as x minus 2 squared. Now look at this. X minus 2 squared becomes x squared minus 2x is minus 4x. Minus 2 times minus 2 is positive 4. 4 over 2 squared is 4. The negative 2 is still outside that bracket, so that became x minus 2 squared minus 4 over 2 is 2 squared, which is 4, times a negative, which makes it negative 4 plus 8 gives me positive 4. Multiply this negative 2 in, that gives me negative 2 multiplied by x minus 2 squared. Minus 2 times positive 4 is negative 8. My equation now reads h of x is equal to negative 2 x minus 2 squared minus 8. From this I can now sketch my graph. My a value is equal to negative 2, that means it's the frown face graph. My turning point is given by x minus p, p value is equal to 2. My q value is negative 8. My x-intercept happens when negative 2 x minus 2 squared minus 8 is equal to 0. Take that minus 8 across, it becomes positive 8. Divided by negative 2, which makes it negative 4. From here immediately you can see that you're going to be squaring both sides. We cannot square a negative number. That means for this one here there are no x-intercepts. No x-intercepts for that one. Y-intercept happens when x is equal to 0. That means that y is going to equal negative 2. 0 minus 2 is negative 2 squared, which is positive 4, minus 8, which gives me negative 8, which is negative 16. Now onto the sketch of this graph. I'm just going to erase this over here, which by now you would have copied down. I'm going to draw my x-axis a little bit higher, and I'll show you why. Firstly, my turning point is at x is equal to 2, y is equal to negative 8, so that's somewhere over there. No x-intercepts. The only other bit of information I have is my y-intercept, which is negative 16, so that's somewhere over there. That means that my graph is going to look like that. and that is what h of x looks like. Turning point of 2, -8, and my y-intercept of -16. Just because I had no x-intercepts doesn't mean that the graph doesn't exist. It just means that it does not cut the x-axis. We will now look at the equation form y is equals to ax squared plus bx plus c. Please note that even though the equation form is slightly different from what we were previously doing, it is still the same parabolas that we are sketching. Let us look at how to sketch this graph. First rule, look at the a value. Again, if the a value is positive, it has a smiley face, and if the a value is negative, it has the frown. Rule 2, we look at the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is the line x is equals to minus b over 2a. Rule number 3, we find our turning point. Our turning point exists where x equals to minus b over 2a. So once we've found minus b over 2a, we substitute that into every x value and we find our corresponding y value. Notice that our turning point has 2 coordinates, as do all points on a graph. The x value is the axis of symmetry and the y value is the y value when the x value of the axis of symmetry is substituted into the equation. We then look for the x-intercept. That happens when y is equals to 0. We then look for the y-intercept, and that happens when x is equals to 0. And lastly, we sketch it. Notice as we are sketching it, we start off by looking at its shape so we know more or less where it's going to fit. We then look at our axis of symmetry. We then put in our turning point, which always lies on the axis of symmetry. We then put in our x-intercepts and then our y-intercept, and we join it, and we have a parabola. We are now going to look at the parabola of the form y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c. The example I'm going to use reads f of x is equal to x squared minus 3x minus 10. Step 1, I look at my a value. In this case, my a value is positive 1, which means that it's the smiley face graph. Step 2, I look for a thing called my axis of symmetry. My axis of symmetry occurs when x is equal to minus b over 2a. In this case, my b value is negative 3. So my axis of symmetry is at x is equal to minus b. So that's minus 3 over 2a, which is 2 times 1, which is equal to positive 3 over 2. Step 3, I look for my y coordinate of the turning point, which happens at f of minus b over 2a, or rather f of my axis of symmetry. All I do is I substitute my axis of symmetry into wherever I've got an x, which in this case will give me x squared, which will be 3 over 2 squared, minus 3x, which is minus 3 times 3 over 2, minus 10. That will equal 9 over 4 minus 9 over 2 minus 10, common denominator of 4, That means that that's going to read 9 over 4 minus 18 over 4 minus 40 over 4, which is going to equal minus 49 over 4. This is my y value, which is also roughly equal to negative 12.25. That means that my turning point's coordinates are an x value of positive 3 over 2 and a y value of negative 49 over 4 or negative 12.25. Step 4, I look for my x-intercepts. X-intercepts happen when y is equal to 0. That means that that whole thing is going to equal 0. That means that x squared minus 3x minus 10 is going to equal 0. This I can factorize into x minus 5 multiplied by x plus 2 is equal to 0. That means my two x-intercepts are x is equal to 5 or x is equal to negative 2. Not or, and. X is equal to negative 2. Step 5, I look for my y-intercept, which happens when x is equal to 0. That means that y will equal 0 squared minus 3 times 0 minus 10, which is equal to negative 10. Now I sketch my graph. When I'm sketching my graph, always first label your x and your y-axis, Now, the a value doesn't really play into it just yet. But look at this. Axis of symmetry is that x is equal to positive 3 over 2. Positive 3 over 2, let's put that somewhere over here. That means that this is the axis of symmetry, or this is the mirror of our graph. Our turning point happens on the axis of symmetry and a y value of negative 12.25. So that's going to be somewhere over here. It's on the axis of symmetry and a y value of negative 12.25 or just negative 49 over 4. That means that the coordinates of the turning point are 3 over 2 and negative 49 over 4. That's my turning point. I'm now going to look at my x-intercepts. My x-intercepts are 5 and negative 2. There's negative 2. And there's 5. And my y-intercept is at negative 10, which is going to be somewhere over there. That means that my graph is going to look like that. And that is the graph f of x. I want you to have a go at the following exercise. Press pause on your DVD player, and when you return, we'll go through it together. The first one I gave you to do read f of x is equal to 2x squared minus 8x minus 24. Step 1, look at the a value. In this case, the a value is equal to positive 2, which means that it's the smiley face graph. Step 2, we look at our axis of symmetry. Axis of symmetry, remember, is when x is equal to minus b over 2a, which in this case is going to equal negative 8 over 2 times 2, which is equal to positive 8 over 4, which is 2. Step 3, our y coordinate of our turning point, which happens at f of minus b over 2a, which is going to be f of 2, which is 2 times 2 squared minus 8 times 2 minus 24, which is equal to 2 squared is 4 times 2 is 8, minus 16 is equal to negative 8, negative 24 is negative 32. Step 4, we look for our x-intercepts. Our x-intercepts, remember, happen when y is equal to 0. That means that 2x squared minus 8x minus 24 is equal to 0. Divide through by a 2, which will leave us with x squared minus 4x minus 4x minus 12 is equal to 0. Factors of 12 that give us 4 are negative 6, positive 2, x minus 6, x plus 2 is equal to 0. That means that x is equal to 6 or x is equal to negative 2. The fifth thing we're going to look for is our y-intercept, which happens at f of 0, or rather when x is equal to 0. That means that our y-intercept, in this case, y is going to equal negative 24. Sketching our graph, x-axis, y-axis. Firstly, our turning point, you will recall, happened at x is equal to 2. Sorry, I forgot to put my coordinates in here. X is equal to 2, y is negative 32. That's our turning point. Our axis of symmetry is at x is equal to 2, y is equal to negative 32. That's going to be somewhere down there. That's the point 2 and negative 32. We then have our two x-intercepts of 6 and negative 2, which is going to go over there and over there. And we've also got our y-intercept of negative 24, which is somewhere over there. That means my graph will look something like that. And that's the graph f of x. Negative 24, negative 2, 6, and the turning point negative 2 and negative 32. The second one I gave you to do read g of x is equal to negative 4x squared minus 4x plus 24. A value in this case is negative 4, which means that it's the frowny face graph. Axis of symmetry is when x is equal to minus b over 2a, which in this case is negative 4 over 2 times negative 4, which is going to give me an answer of positive 4 over negative 8, which is equal to negative 1 over 2. Y coordinate of the turning point happens at g of negative 1 over 2, which is going to equal negative 4 multiplied by negative 1 over 2 squared minus 4 multiplied by negative 1 over 2 plus 24, which is going to equal, now this you can sit and multiply it out the long way. Alternatively, you can just use your calculator. I'm going to use my calculator to give me negative 4 open bracket negative 1 over 2 squared minus 4 negative 1 over 2 plus 24, which gives me an answer of 25. That means that my turning point is negative 1 over 2 and y is equal to 25. The next thing I'm going to look at is my x-intercept, which means that minus 4x squared minus 4x plus 24 is equal to 0. Take out a common negative 4, that means that x squared plus x minus 6 is equal to 0. That's going to be x plus 3 times x minus 2 is equal to 0. X is equal to negative 3 and x is equal to 2. My y-intercept happens when x is equal to 0, which in this case will be 0 minus 0 plus 24, which is equal to positive 24. When I sketch this graph, I'm going to have firstly my x-axis and my y-axis. My axis of symmetry worked out to negative 1 over 2. That means that my axis of symmetry is going to be over there. My turning point was negative 1 over 2 and positive 25. So I'm going to put that way up there. Negative 1 over 2 and positive 25. My two x-intercepts were negative 3 and positive 2. Negative 3, I'm going to put that over there, and positive 2. My y-intercept happened at positive 25, which is over, positive 24. That means that my graph turns over there, looks like this. And that is the graph of g of x. The third one I gave you to do read h of x is equal to x minus 5 multiplied by x plus 6. This one here, I'm going to do it the normal way. Step 1, look at my a value. Step 2, look at my axis of symmetry. Step 3, turning point. Except I'm going to start by doing step 4 first. Step 4 looks at my x-intercepts, which happens when y is equal to 0. That means that that is equal to 0. That means my two x-intercepts are either x is equal to 5 and x is equal to negative 6. Keep that in mind. It's already in that form, no need to factorize it later on. This is still step 4, by the way. Now, before I get started with this, I'm going to multiply it out. That will give me x squared minus 5x plus 6x is plus x minus 5 times positive 6 is equal to negative 30. A value is equal to positive 1. That means that it's the smiley face graph. Axis of symmetry happens when x is equal to minus b over 2a, which in this case x is going to equal minus b, which is minus 1 over 2a, which is 2. So my x value is simply x is equal to minus 1 over 2. That means that my y coordinate of my turning point will be h of negative 1 over 2. Negative 1 over 2 squared will give me positive 1 over 4 minus 1 over 2 minus 30. Again, you can just plug this into a calculator. 1 over 4 minus 1 over 2 minus 30 gives me an answer of negative 30.25. That is my y value. That means my turning point has the coordinates negative 1 over 2 and negative 30.25. Step 4, x-intercepts. I've already got it, of 5 and negative 6. Y-intercept, step 5 happens when x is equal to 0. 0 plus 0 is 0 minus 30, means that y is equal to negative 30. I've got my y-intercept, I've got my two x-intercepts, I've got my turning point and my axis of symmetry. I can now sketch my graph. Again, I'm going to start off by drawing my axis, my x-axis, and let's extend the y-axis a little bit. My axis of symmetry happens at x is equal to negative 1 over 2, which is somewhere over there. Y value of negative 30.25, so let's put that in over there. Means my turning point is negative 1 over 2 and negative 30.25. My two x-intercepts are at negative 6 and at positive 5. And my y-intercept is at negative 30, so that's just over there. That means that my graph is going to look like this. And that is the graph h of x. Please note that sometimes if you do sketch your graph through the point that you've written in, just rewrite that point if you want to. Alternatively, take the sneaky way out, draw your graph and then put your points in. The fourth one I gave you to do, read L of x is equal to 2x minus 1 squared plus 5. This example here, we can sketch it how we were sketching it previously, where we've got ax minus b squared plus q. I'm going to sketch this differently though. I'm going to get it into the form y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c. Easy way to do that, I'm just going to multiply that out. That's going to become x squared times 2, which is 2x squared, minus x is minus 2x, times 2 is minus 4x. Minus 1 squared is positive 1, times 2 is positive 2, plus 5 is positive 8. Start off, firstly my a value is equal to positive 2, which means that it's the smiley face graph. Axis of symmetry, x is equal to minus b over 2a, which means that we are looking for minus b, which is minus 4 over 2a, which is 2 times 2, which is positive 4 over 4, which is equal to 1. Y coordinate of the turning point is equal to 2 times 1 squared minus 4 times 1 plus 8, which is equal to 1 squared is 1 times 2 is 2, minus 4 is negative 2, plus 8 is positive 6. That means my turning point is x is equal to 1, y is equal to 6. X-intercept, notice how I'm writing all over the place. X-intercept is when y is equal to 0. That means that 2x squared minus 4x plus 8 is equal to 0. Take out a common factor of 2. That means that x squared minus 2x plus 4 is equal to 0. This can become, unfortunately this one here can't be factorized. There are no factors of 4 that will give us negative 2. Also, if we do try and use either completing the square or the quadratic formula, you're going to find that this is undefined, or rather that there are no x-intercepts. Now the reason that there are no x-intercepts, again look at this, our turning point is at 1 and positive 6, but it's a smiley face graph. That means that it's going to be a graph that turns at x is equal to 1, y is equal to 6. It's going to turn over there, but it's a smiley face graph, which means that it's never going to touch the x-axis. Y-intercept happens when x is equal to 0. In this case, that's going to be 0, 0, minus 0 is 0, plus 8, which means that my y-intercept is 8. So I can just sketch this in because all I have is my turning point, my y-intercept. That's my x-axis, that's my y-axis, and this is the graph L of x. The last one I gave you to do, read k of x is equal to negative 4x squared. Now remember that it is in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, except the b value is equal to 0 and the c value is also equal to 0. Plus, it's basically plus 0x plus 0, right, which is just negative 4x squared. I'm going to start this one, as I always do, by looking at my a value, which is negative 4, which means that it's the frown face graph. Step 2, I look at my axis of symmetry, x is equal to minus b over 2a. I said that my b value was 0, so that's going to be 0. My y-axis, or rather my y-coordinate of the turning point, will be at k of 0, which is going to equal negative 4 times 0, which is equal to 0. That means my turning point in this case is at 0, 0. X-intercepts happen when y is equal to 0. That means that minus 4x squared is equal to 0. That means that x is equal to 0. Y-intercept happens when x is equal to 0, so that's all happening at 0. Very simply, it's a frown face graph. It's turning at 0, 0. It's cutting the x-axis at 0, and it's cutting the y-axis at 0. And that is the graph that we have. And that's k of x. That's our x-axis. That's our y-axis. We are now going to look at moving in the opposite direction. That is, from the graph onto the equation. The example I'm going to look at is the equation g of x is equal to ax minus b squared plus q. The first question I ask is determine a, p and q values. I have my turning point M, which is the point 4 and 3. I've also got another point A, which is the coordinates 7 and negative 2. Let us look at how we get to the equation. Remember that the P value is the x coordinate of our turning point. That means that that will read x minus 4 squared plus q, or plus 3. This is the equation of our circle. That means that P is equal to 4, Q is equal to 3. Sorry, not our circle. That is the equation of our parabola, which means that P is equal to 4, Q is equal to 3, and we are still looking for our A value. To get our A value, I'm going to plug in these 2 points. The y coordinate is negative 2 is equal to A multiplied by 7 minus 4 squared plus 3. Take the 3 across, minus 2 minus 3 is going to give me minus 5, is equal to 8 times 7 minus 4 is 3, 3 squared is 9, so it's 8 times 9,